This is not one of my favorite times of the year, and I'm usually cloistered away, but Alan Thompson has asked me, and I could not refuse coming to this event, because Alan Thompson has pulled off a small miracle in bringing freedom to a martyred country. And not only freedom in the sense of bringing the stories of when we were together through the International Tribunal, of bringing stories subsequently in interviews and so on, but actually building freedom in a country that is still reeling under the attempts at reconciliation only 18 years after. And when we compare the Holocaust, which is over 60 years ago, and how many of the survivors feel that the Holocaust was this morning, 18 years ago after a genocide, many of us feel it is also just this morning. But being able to introduce a dimension to a society that has a fundamental trait of freedom through journalism is no mean feat. No mean feat in a country that is still working at trying to establish that full democracy and its expression of its individual members, and permitting all of its citizens to feel the freedom and the equality and the sense that they are part of a democracy. And journalism is that instrument of freedom, but also that voice of democracy. And so going there, reestablishing that school, and inculcating in young Rwandans the essentiality of being truthful, transparent, objective, courageous in presenting what is happening, even when it makes people unhappy. And we can see that even in our country these days, where people don't necessarily like the story that comes out. And in so doing, still try to bring forward an objective perspective of what is happening in order to permit the citizenry to be able to take an appropriate decision. And so, helping a nation bring freedom and sustaining it and building depth to it is a higher calling. And this is what all of you who have done at a very poor salary often and under difficult conditions, you who come through this initiative and have been in the field over these years, have been part of building the depth of freedom and democracy in that country. And many of your students are finding it difficult, or ex-students, to be able to practice that trade. And that is, I think, to be expected in a country that's been so torn apart and with such a difficult history. What is inappropriate or unacceptable is that, in fact, you don't sustain it. Is that you even put in doubt whether or not to inculcate those skills, that knowledge, and provide them with the experience of articulating objective journalism in a society. That you don't think that you should sustain that because of the difficulties, that you don't feel that in fact you've got to build that depth to it, would be horrific after giving them the taste of it, giving them this glimmer of that perspective of a society, of a free society, of a society that believes in democracy and is attempting to reconcile all the different frictions of the differences into a democratic society. That you've given them the taste of being able to express what is there and the citizenry to listen and read it and see it and then to cut it off is totally unacceptable, is horrific, and it would be worse than not having gone at all. This is a long-term exercise. This is not Now 5 years, thank you very much. 5 years is setting the baseline. You've established the credibility of what you've been able to bring forward to that country in the world of journalism. So now you've got to build on it. Now you've got to sustain it. Now you've got to lobby for the funds to keep it going. And now you've got to harass the living daylights out of the politicians and the bureaucrats in this country to do it. And if you have to go to a foreign land to get the funding, as Alan is out to do, to be able to sustain it, then you do that too. But when you do it, you also remind the people of this country that maybe some of the decisions that are taken regarding how we fund international development, how we help nascent democracies bring rule of law, good governance, human rights, gender equality, education for all, maybe we don't have it exactly right. Maybe it needs to be adjusted. 18 years ago, about this time, the first of about 800 French paratroopers were landing in Kigali. They were landing in Kigali not in response to a call for reinforcements to hopefully stop in its tracks a horrific civil war and an unimaginable destruction of human life through a genocide. They were landing to pull out those expatriates who had for decades lived in that country and in certain circumstances abused it and used it. They were there to pull out the expatriates. They were also there to pull out some of the leadership of this horrific catastrophe, who still live free in that country and still keep alive that possibility that extremism could come back and one day attempt again for a final solution. And we let that happen. We're letting that happen. Ladies and gentlemen, 18 years ago, the world abandoned Rwanda. Rwandans became inhuman towards Rwandans. But the international community also lost its sense of humanity, because the 193 other countries did not give the UN nor the ability to bring a more sustainable or substantive mandate, but refused to give the UN the resources to stop that genocide and to save hundreds of thousands of lives. And ladies and gentlemen, we were part of that 193 countries. So tonight is not a downer, I hope, and nor is it an expression of pessimism into the human frailty that we live with. On the contrary, tonight is a sign of optimism. Tonight is an expression that in fact we can bring back or even introduce values and moral and ethical and legal references that are needed in a democratic society in order to permit the individual citizens to thrive, not survive, but thrive, and with the hope of in fact seeing that freedom for their next generations. Alan Thompson is a leader in this country, but he is an innovator and he is a hero to me in Rwanda for permitting that country to taste freedom and to hopefully build on it. Thank you very much.